So I've been thinking about not just the general election that's just happened, but also the left in general, and why people don't really get on board with their ideas, although 30% of the electorate in Britain is still a hefty chunk, clearly, but why the left fails generally. And I think this really comes down to a twofold issue: hypocrisy and extremes. We've all probably heard the phrase, "it's all projection" with the left. If you haven't, congratulations, now you have. And I think it comes out as comes out of a kind of a disillusionment, a real disillusionment with the human spirit. In the world of the left, thinking is all very dualistic. There's right, there's wrong, there's good, there's evil. And actually very few things actually fall into these categories. They confuse themselves by thinking that human beings are not both of these things in differing amounts. You look at the hatred, the vitriol directed at people who voted Conservative on Twitter. Rachel Riley being told that someone hoped her baby was stillborn. The agitated screaming of Antifa and protesters outside Parliament with the hashtag #NotMyPM campaign, and "Who do you serve? Who do you protect?" being directed at the police, as if it's not the citizenry, obviously. It's becoming frenzied. They fail to realise the evil in themselves as much as they may have the desire to do good, and because they cannot be evil in their own minds, their dualistic thinking means that if there's one thing wrong about them, they cannot be good, only evil. They must all have a kind of, I guess, an imposter syndrome. Most of them will realise they have vices, so according to their own paradigm, they must be evil. Therefore, they must hide that fact as long as possible. I say fact, inverted commas. As long as possible with their virtue signals and their loud protestations, but also with what appears to be, proto-pogroms, clearly. If they demonise their opponents significantly enough, their own evil will be unnoticed in the larger battle. In this way, the left is always driving the case, at least for the moment, from what I'm observing, towards extremes. Polarisation, this in-group, out-group mentality, all whilst shouting about how they are against the in-group, out-group mentality, as if in-group or out-grouping is something you can escape as part of your human experience. Everyone has an out-group. I have an out-group of murderers. I don't particularly want to associate with them. Paedophiles, that sort of thing. It's quite easy to formulate some basic categories for in-group, out-group stuff. Again and again over the past few days, I've seen the loss of composure from so many Labour supporters on my feed, ranging from something more passive-aggressive to "get off my Twitter or Facebook, I don't want racist, xenophobic monsters who want babies to die dirtying my feed," and outright calls for the deaths of people, like the young woman the other day who said, "I want to be a doctor, and I hope Boris Johnson dies a horrible death." I don't think you quite understand the mindset of the doctor and the Hippocratic Oath, young lady. There is a fundamental disconnect with reality from the Labour supporting left and the left wing in general. One of the biggest is the lack of concept of cost. This doesn't just come down to fiscal costs, though they were a major reason the Labour Party lost, obviously. Every single person I've seen, in fact I've spoken to, on the street outside of London, and that kind of London bubble, the first question on their mind, without even listening to a single policy, or, considering the policy damage ramifications, is, even if he could do this, how can he pay for it? The primary supporters of Labour are middle-class suburbanites, students and champagne socialists. The three groups of people who either don't understand what cost of living really means and what it entails, or won't be affected much by changes to it. As I've said, it's not just the nature of cost in capital, it's the nature of social costs in changing policy. Time and again there have been statements from the left stating that conditions in the NHS have got worse during austerity. Congratulations, you've made the very real distinction that cuts entail costs. It's not just shaving away dead weight, and I'd wager the Conservatives didn't do a great job on that either. Of course, there would be a cost to making savings. A family that goes without holidays, meals out, waits to turn the heating on for extra weeks in the winter is going to feel worse off. A bit colder, and the quality of their diet's probably going to decrease, but it's a case of when needs must, and as much as they shout out about, we're the 5th or the 6th largest economy in the world, this shouldn't be happening, it's this conflation of rights and privileges. There are privileges that our society can afford to do, but our net income is not fixed. Inflation, the value of our goods doesn't always go up with inflation. Sometimes it increases. And so there are going to be tighter times. It's going to go up and down, as it does for any family in the UK. And I get that the Conservatives are not without fault. There are plenty of reasons to hate on them. There's plenty of reasons to criticise the cuts that they've made in certain areas. But the left just doesn't appear to get this idea that where there are cuts, there must be costs. And actually, we still have a much better quality of life in this country than many other places in the world. We should be grateful for that. We should try and make it better where we can, but it's got to be realistic. The left doesn't appear to get this at all. As I said, there's plenty of reasons to hate the Conservatives, especially Cameron's "we're all in it together" big society claptrap. And the deficit, though, does appear to have stabilised, despite all this stuff, all the flaws with it. If you look at the graphs, the deficit appears to have stabilised, although borrowing is still higher than I would like. And this is the thing we worked for. This is the thing that the Labour government that was in last destroyed so much of the economy. They left it in such a state, they even sold off our material assets like gold to make their books look better. To all the communist types out there, all the socialists, social liberals out there who don't understand global finance, your assertion that capitalism relies on exponential, unending growth and this is unsustainable. Well, I have a newsflash for you. Communism, relying on exponential, unending borrowing, is even more unsustainable. Now we're heading into a Conservative government. It needs to be suitably kept in check by a decent opposition. It means nuance, evaluating the grey areas. It means highlighting the inefficiencies in the policy of the Conservatives. It also means tackling the Labour Party's problems in the very areas they claim to care about equalising. They need to get their house in order before rectifying the world, so to speak, to quote someone who I'm sure most of you know. It doesn't mean allowing anti-Semitism in your own party to look like when the transcripts came out of the Labour meetings where they said things like, just shut up, Jew. No one is sitting in a Conservative Party meeting, no matter how much the left wants to accuse the Tory Party of Islamophobia, right? And if a Muslim comes in, they're not saying shut up, Muzzy. That's not the way it works. The Conservative Party is not sending the Antifa arm of Momentum round to members' houses who, are threatening to release this stuff, and throwing bricks through their windows to shut them up. The Labour Party needs to start treating their opposition as humans and as fallible, as prone to vice as themselves. They need to recognise that vice in themselves. At the end of the day, here's my message to the Labour Party. You consistently claim that you are fighting a proto-fascistic, violent, totalitarian regime. And the solution to that is not to become a proto-fascistic, violent, totalitarian regime. The left in leadership now, and I distinguish that from a meaningless term, relatively, like far left or hard left, claim to be on the side of kinder, gentler politics, when really, at the moment, from their actions that they're taking, they wish to hide the truth of their nature, and they'll kill anyone who disagrees with them whilst parading that corpse around in public and claiming they hanged a fascist.